Hey everyone, welcome back to the Season Podcast. This is a show where we dive into the world of hospitality and put a spotlight on the people that run it. So today, we're super lucky to be joined by Dina.
Hi.
She's come all the way from Mysore. And yeah, super excited to have a quick chat. Would love to kind of explore the journey of SAPA and yeah, your whole impression on just building, the whole baker to entrepreneur mindset and everything. Would love to explore that.
Yeah, that would be fun. And also, how does it feel to be the next best destination after the Mysore Palace for people to visit? Because those are the only two things I've heard. It's either Sapa or Mysore Palace.
Or both.
Or
And
Masala
the
Dosa.
zoo. If you have kids, you also go to the zoo.
Okay, the zoo I didn't know.
Yeah, it's I think India's largest zoo. It's
Okay.
pretty big.
I have to say, I did, the last time I went to SAPA, which was my first time actually, was last month.
Okay.
We had a little team outing. We kind of went as a team, four of us. And we didn't know about how early we should have turned up. When we went there, everything was sold out, or most of the things sold out. And we learned that we had to pre-book the croissants as well. But no, there were still a lot of things on the display as well. The space looked fantastic, by the way.
Thanks.
I think I read online that it was a house before that.
I mean, it is a residential house. There are 6 of these mansions. They
Right.
were built for the engineers who built the KRS dam by
Oh,
the
wow.
royal family, I think.
Okay,
And before us, it was a very unofficial bed and breakfast.
okay.
And when I heard that they are moving to Portugal, I was like, okay, I'll talk to the house owner now.
So how long did the whole setup take from the time that you found the space to getting it ready to open on day one?
The whole procedure took a year.
A year.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
And
And-
Sapa, before that, was
Yeah.
in a shared space with Umbrella Bar.
So we had 2 other locations. The first one was with Umbrella Bar, my friend who is an architect and a painter. That was like a cloud kitchen, and
Okay.
it was much, much more limited. There was no seating, and it was only Thursday and Saturday, 5 to 7 p.m.
Okay.
Then I moved into a very small cafe with 5 tables. And when that became completely too small, then we said, okay, now we have to renovate and look at something else.
So then you build up according to the demand.
Yeah,
Rather than just
very
opening a-
like small steps.
And I think the second cafe was just before the pandemic, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, we opened 2 weeks before the lockdown was
Yeah.
finished.
So how was that like? Like, after opening and, getting your morale and everything up, how do you take
And
the
I
news?
just hired people.
Oh,
right?
okay,
I
yeah.
hired like 6 people.
Right.
As an owner, as an entrepreneur, that's like,
Yeah.
That must
I
have
was
been
like, okay,
scary,
maybe
right?
now this is a sign. I kind of believe in signs sometimes. I was like, maybe this is a sign I shouldn't do this.
do this.
Leave it. And then it was really sweet. Then my parents' friends in Germany were like, this is terrible. We will start a crowdfunding for you and we will pull you through this.
That's so
And
sweet.
that so that made it possible for me to continue baking alone, but still keeping all the staff on
Right.
payroll. And they didn't come for 2 or 3 months, and I baked on my own, and we just delivered to people directly. But always working. Like there was, I think, 1 week break. That's it.
But it's
Makes
amazing
sense.
that you were still paying your staff. Like a lot of good companies during lockdown didn't
But
pay
it
their
was-
staff for like 8 months, 9
Yeah.
months straight.
But
then-
that was because of this crowdfunding. So I was very happy about that we could maintain.
But
Right.
like, were you still doing some sort of sale during
Yeah.
lockdown?
I kept on.
One is the story about selling the bread from the grill that you were telling
Yeah.
us,
So
right?
in
Off
the beginning,
camera.
we would deliver. And I think that worked really well because it also gave a very intimate connection to people. Because we were the only faces that they could have a conversation with sometimes. And we would bring them cake. So they were so happy to see us. And I know where all of these customers live. I had chats with them. Sometimes I would see their husband or the wife and have a chat with them. So it made a very, very personal, intimate connection. And I always had this thing that even before the lockdown, you have to be very consistent with being available. You can't run a kitchen and then be like, oh, I'm closing for a month.
Yeah.
I want people to be assured of, even if it's only Thursday and Saturday, every Thursday and
Thursday and
Saturday, this is available and I can go. That has to be in people's minds,
Right.
I felt.
I think our consistency becomes important.
Yeah,
Like, if
and
you want
even during lockdown, I was like, no, I'm going to be the one who will still have nice treats for you available twice a week. And that became a big impression, I think, for people in Mysore, in that small community.
And is that what you guys were known for at the time? Like you said, you were delivering cakes mainly around the time, or was it still the
Breads
focus on
also.
breads as well?
Yeah, yeah. So we did obviously things that traveled easier. We couldn't get all the ingredients, so I had to really downsize menu. And I was baking alone, so we did breads, donuts, and tea cakes, or simple travel like cinnamon buns and chocolate babkas, things that you can carry easily. And that was also when the donuts kind of exploded because
Right, right.
everybody started ordering donuts. And I was just frying like 150 donuts on my own all
wow.
the time. Yeah.
Interesting. So most of the ingredients you were sourcing locally, if I'm not wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which again helped during the lockdown because
of
you
course.
can't get anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
Also a good time for experimentation, right? With sort of figuring out your recipes back again.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's something I read online, that you were mainly selling like your experiments and you tried a lot to innovate during COVID and everything.
Also before, because I'm not trained. So this
Right.
whole idea behind the weekly menu that we do of doing the menu structure remains the same, but we change the flavors and the types and the fillings. That was mainly because I wasn't trained and I wanted to experiment and try new things. So the initial thought was, hey, let me try a few things and make that available every week for people to come and try.
Right. So you're a self-taught baker, right?
Yeah.
And the first introduction to baking, when was that?
4 years.
4
5
years.
years old
5
at
years.
home, yeah.
Okay, yeah, your family is very food centric.
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
was reading about it that
Yeah.
the story about going back home for apple harvest
Yeah.
and having whole sausages. But so your first experience, I think, professionally or working with a chef was Goa, right? When you were working.
No,
in the
I mean,
cafe.
I worked in hospitality before and it was always, everybody in the places where I worked knew that I loved food. I was working more front of house. So whenever they were super busy and I wasn't busy, they would always call me like, hey, help us out.
Right.
Like making some puff sheet pastries. Or I worked in this really traditional German pastry shop or cafe where they made very old school layered cakes. So I would help them out in the kitchen and taste everything they make. And
Right.
so that has been since I'm 15.
Any specific reason that you kind of chose sourdough as your niche? Or
Initially, yeah, that's the first thing that popped up. Right? The sourdough became the most popular initially.
So that was the Goa thing because I was working in this, it was like a volunteer place and there was this baker from the UK and we had a wood fire oven and he just made a sourdough starter out of nothing. And then he just mixed some butter and some water and he said, I have to go to the market. Can you stretch and fold the dough for me every hour for 5 hours? So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then he baked it in the wood fire oven. And he was very like, the flour isn't good and the bread is not great. I'm not happy. And I was like, this is amazing. Like you just mix these two things and this comes out. It's crazy. Like I was really mind blown by that.
And that's when after that you deep dive into this general sourdough because that was such a cool story that your starter was born in Himalayas and then you ended up taking it to Germany and bringing it back.
Yes.
So, but you also mentioned that, the starter sort of gets affected if you change the location. So, did you know that back when you were traveling with it to Germany and then bringing it back? Did it affect your starter?
You can sense it in the activity.
Okay.
Like the activity is, like generally you have a feeding pattern and you want your starter to peak within a certain amount of time at a certain temperature. So usually when I travel, that activity really goes down and the peaking takes longer because there's a change in water or a change in humidity in the air and everything changes. So that takes I feel like it's a calibration time.
But now it's what, like a 9-year-old starter?
I think.
Right? 8, 9 years.
Yeah, 9 years.
That's crazy. And does it have a name? Usually people keep
It doesn't have a name.
So, Dina, one thing I wanted to ask you regarding the whole setup of the whole process, right, was the staffing journey, right? How is it different? Not that I'm sure you would have a benchmark to compare to, but when it comes to building a team in a place like in a city like Mysore, do you think that it kind of differed when it comes to, for example, setting up in Bangalore or something like that?
I mean, from what I hear, it differs a lot in the sense of what kind of people apply with what intent. We have a lot of Mysoreans who apply who are completely untrained, and we train them from scratch. And the hope is always that people will stay on because they are rooted there and they feel very comfortable, they feel taken care of, and they feel like they are supported in their journey of learning and financially also supported enough. And then I feel like it's a really great long-term journey that you have with people.
Right.
And I think that's harder in Bangalore. To get that kind of a relationship is, I
To
build
build a family and all
yeah,
that.
much more difficult.
Right. Makes sense. So how big is your team today?
50.
50 team. Yeah.
That must be crazy starting from just like one person to now. And this is in 4 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But for how long were you doing this completely alone?
I think just a few months. And then I hired Veena, who I started training. And then already these bake sales in the first place started to become very popular. And then I asked Veena, hey, do you know somebody? And then she said, yeah, my sister actually is also there. So then Rekha came and joined. And then we moved to the other place and I started hiring more people.
Okay. And now there's a whole savory menu option as well, right?
Yeah,
Or
so-
initially it was just breads and pastries.
So in the smaller cafe, we had only one kitchen. So we had the pastry team in the morning, then they leave, then the savory kitchen comes, completely rearranges the fridge, rearranges the entire setup, and then we have dinner.
Right.
And that was also a reason why I was like, hey, let's move into a bigger space because then we can separate the two operations.
Right. How long did that go? A year, right?
A little more, almost 2 years.
And by then you're expanding your team with the mindset that I'm going to shift to a bigger place and training more people.
Also, just because the demand became so much more. So we constantly started to hire more people and increase production, increased service team, increased housekeeping. That's like an ongoing process.
Also, so many people started traveling to Mysore for
Yeah.
this, right? I think that must have been were you anticipating that?
No.
Or was that just like completely
No,
out
I
of
didn't
the-
anticipate any
Because
of this.
when these guys went for the team out, they were saying that every other car was like an other state number. So
Yeah.
most of the people there were just either traveling for SAPA or, as you said, Mysore
Yeah.
Palace.
I mean, yeah, you'd see like the number plates from all of the southern India states as well, which I found quite impressive. And I think people can kind of look at SAPA as a case study, right, of how a brand was built out of a non-tier one city and still kind of attracted crowds from these tier one cities.
Tier 1
right?
cities.
Do you have any insight or any feeling as to how that kind of came to be?
I think it's a mix of a lot of things, and a lot of things are timing as well. So how does a group of people look for something else that's not available yet, maybe, or how ready is a group of people for something new? I think that's very luck and time specific. So I feel like it was really the right time that it even rooted well in Mysore in the beginning. And doing this step-by-step building led to an increased radius. And I like to approach things on multiple levels, which we also spoke about before, where you look at ambience, you look at brand concept, what feeling do you want to convey when people come in for a coffee? I was always very certain that I wanted to be a place where people are like, hey, I have an afternoon for myself. I would love to come and sit by myself and have a coffee. That kind of feeling that you feel so welcomed and warm and taken care of that you want to come back. That's one thing. In terms of ambience, in terms of team, I always wanted to make sure that the team likes working there and feels like this is a great microcosmos to kind of enter in, learn or experience new things, make connections, and take something from when you worked at SAPA and move on either to a different place or open your own place. To have that work culture was very important to me. Product, of course, has to be really good and can't be substandard just because you don't have a lot of competition in the beginning. Like it should always be what you think is the best it can be, or what standard you hold for a taste. I think it should be very personal also, and it's different for everybody. Some people like their sourdough bread a little less dark, some like it more dark. And of course you can adjust, but I think there's also some things that are important to you that you won't budge even if it might not be received well by everybody. And I think for me, the relation was always very personal because I love Mysore. So if you love being somewhere, I think you can convey the feeling that your environment gives you very well to other people too. And that is what people can sense, I think, that you are very comfortable and you love the space and you try to give that to people even if they are not from Mysore. And I think that is very enticing sometimes. And it becomes very representative of your time that you've spent in Mysore. Some people, they come and tell me, oh, I was in Mysore for a week and we came 4 times and we loved it so much. And then it becomes part of your experience.
Yep.
But I also think it actually helped us that we were in Mysore because it was this little limitation. You can't get it all the time. You can only get it when you're there and you plan, okay, if I come to Bangalore, then maybe I can do a trip down to Mysore. And it was this thing. And even when we started in the first place, when it was just a cloud kitchen, it was hidden somewhere on the 2nd floor and you had to go through Sumeda's office. So a lot of people would come, see her office and leave because they thought this can't be the place. Yeah. So it was like a task to get it. And we were like, hey, can I come into the WhatsApp group? I heard you have this WhatsApp group where I can pre-order. So somehow this has been part of our story throughout that I guess you have to make a little bit of an effort to come and get it.
But which is so nice that people weren't just stumbling upon it, right? People were coming with the idea that, okay, I'm going to visit SAPA. So that is a really cool this thing to have for a brand that is like you were saying, right? You were still in the first phase of it. And even in that, if people were just like so excited about coming to Mysore and trying out stuff. But what was the market for sourdough back then? Like, were there people well-traveled or understood what a good sourdough was and were missing it? Or did you introduce the whole concept of sourdoughs and good breads in Mysore?
I think there's like 2 groups of people. There's one group of people in Mysore who would have lived abroad, who are really missing it. And then there's one group of people who is very health conscious. So those 2 were the ones that sought for it the most. But it became clear very, very soon. And I think especially if you look at German bakeries, if you only want to do bread and pretzels and boulangerie, you really need scale because you can't charge a lot and you can only bake 6 loaves or 12 loaves at a time. So you really need scale to kind of work with breads and boulangerie. And that became very clear that Mysore cannot give scale for breads. So that's why I then started to do pastry because pastry is smaller. People love sweet things. You can even eat 2 or 3 and I can make probably 60 eclairs or 60 babkas at a time. So in terms of production, if you sell less, pastry can be easier to start out with, I think.
Okay. But what, by the time you guys reached, you were selling, it was sold out. So.
Yeah, it was, I think it was at 1:32 p.m. To be honest, that was a little late to arrive.
And we opened at 12.
No, but then also you understand the scale that people are coming and buying, right? If you're selling out in an hour.
It was also a long weekend where everyone was basically traveling and going to their neighboring city.
And again, like croissants are so much harder to scale because we have a small sheeter. So, and when you scale one thing, then you need to scale all things, right? Like even if I get a bigger sheeter, I need another tray trolley, I need another freezer to store the dough.
Right.
It becomes like a whole chain of scaling. And that is always, I feel like we do that very slowly. Like we add more layers to it in a very slow process so that we are sure that the process is still maintained well.
Right.
And do you see the major influx of people on weekends? Or is it busy? Like even the weekdays are busy? Because
weekdays are busy, but can't compare it with weekends.
Weekends must be like people coming from
all the
everywhere,
time,
right?
Yeah.
And weekdays are more localites coming in?
Now I feel like even during the week there's a lot of Bangaloreans, but still more Mysoreans too.
Regular.
And a lot of Mysoreans also don't want to come on the weekends. They're like, it's annoying, it's a pain.
Understandable, honestly.
It takes too long, we have to wait in a queue, we'll come during the
weekend. And they have the luxury too, right? They don't have to travel.
Yeah.
So that way.
When building an audience, were you actively trying to kind of build a Mysore-based audience, or was it just do differently?
So in terms of marketing, I only started giving away some of it last year. I did it myself until then. And I like to have this direct communication. I like talking about what I think my work stands for or the team work stands for. And I don't think it's easy to find somebody who can voice it like you. So I did it myself for most of the time. And there was a lot of behind the scenes process that we explained and showed to people. So there were a lot of industry people who started following us, or people who are just starting to bake or want to open a bakery. Then I started doing these Q&As where people would ask for what fridge do you use? Where do you get your vanilla from? Why are you not on Swiggy? How do you manage this problem? How do you deal with negative feedback? So it became this, hey, now maybe I can ask questions that I don't get to ask all the time. And that being in a tier 2 city, I can really understand, because there's not a lot of chef-run places where I can come and be like, hey, this is really bothering me. What do you do with this problem? I don't have that outlet in Mysore. But I think one thing that unintentionally went really well was people always told me, you can't open something like this in Mysore. It won't run. So I was like, okay, I have my cloud kitchen. I use that to experiment. And then I teach sourdough classes in the big cities.
Okay.
And that really helped in giving the name of what I do and where I'm from.
Forming network with other people.
and doing workshops at Mac Street Kitchen, Miam. I did some of my first ones at Courtyard when they were still running a savory kitchen.
Right.
So I could observe other kitchens. I could observe how their teams run, how do they function. I met other owners. All the people that attended workshops were wanting to know what I do and where I'm from. So that really helped, I think, without thinking about it.
Very organic way of marketing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And later on, I was like, hey, that was really smart.
Interesting.
So how long were you in Mysore before you decided to open a place there? Because you were traveling quite around India, all over India.
Yeah,
right,
I traveled around from 2015 to 2017. And since 2017, I've been in Mysore.
So, like, what made you select Mysore as a place to settle
Yeah, what
down?
was the pull factor of Mysore specifically?
So I wanted to stay in India. I do not like large cities, so they all fell flat. My ex-husband did not like Auroville. I did not like Goa, and I did not like the Himalayas. So there was like very little left. So I worked in a friend's cafe in Leh, and he was from Mysore, and he kept saying, hey, it's super clean. There's a lot of musicians. There's a lot of students. There's a small international crowd there. Why don't you try to go there? And I was like, sure, I'll go. And then we moved, and I really liked it. And 3 weeks later, I was pregnant. So I was like, okay, that's it then. And now we stay.
Okay. And now it's been what? 9, 7? 9,
8.
10?
8
8 years.
Almost 8 years. Yeah.
Yes. And still in love with Mysore, I presume.
Yes.
So you basically started traveling just after high school, right?
Yes.
And that we were discussing is a major difference in India versus this thing, right? It's a
Yeah.
very European thing that you take a gap year and you go and travel.
Like, I feel like now it's almost seen as a bad thing on your CV if you didn't take a gap year. It's like, oh, then you don't have any extra experience.
Which is a very good standard to have, right? In India, it's the opposite. If you take a gap year, that means you were not serious enough.
Unfocused,
or you were,
lazy.
Yeah.
Even to convince your parents that you want to take a gap year is a whole separate conversation in India.
And why do you think the pull was India specifically? Given that you've traveled to a lot of other countries, you've had that exposure as well. What was the pull factor about India specifically?
I find it really hard to explain, but somehow, maybe also because you get a longer visa, so you can really explore it more. But I just felt it's so layered and it's so much. I could relate to it much more than other South Asian countries somehow.
Okay.
I felt like there was a lot more, and not more connection to Europe as such, but maybe because India has been such a highly developed culture and there was so much education way before Europe actually, right? So somehow I felt like there's a lot more I can relate to in terms of being here. And there was a lot of Indian people who would travel in India as well. So you have a lot more meeting points with locals. In Southeast Asia, it's mostly like English and Australians
Like tourists,
drinking. Like, I don't know, it's a lot of drinking culture. So you really have to make an effort to get away from this party beach thing. And that problem you don't have in India much. Like, it doesn't feel so commercial and so exploited.
Only Goa, I think, is just one place
exception,
where we have that culture.
at what point did you kind of think to yourself like, hey, I might be based in India for longer than I thought. How do I sustain myself, right? And was that, did you immediately think about hospitality and in particular opening up a cafe, or did you have a few other things in mind as well?
No, so once it was kind of clear that I don't want to go to university yet, that was the only other option. Like I always knew that the initial plan was have a career, and then when you're 50 or 45, then you open a cafe and you've made your money, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, no, anyway, now I moved to Mysore. I really like Mysore. I'm going to have a child. I need to sustain myself. I need to earn money. Then hospitality was kind of the easiest go-to thing.
But what was the career in mind when this was like, I'll work till 50 and then open a cafe?
Medicine.
Medicine.
Or psychology. And even in medicine, I would have gone for psychiatry, I think. Yeah.
That's very cool and a very completely different
Yeah.
And
I kept telling my parents, I'm coming next year. I'm coming next year.
I was
So you
just
always
going to ask, like,
Yeah.
what was your family's reaction once you took the decision of shifting to Mysore? And while you were traveling, was it in mind that I'm going to go and settle in another country, or was it just like, okay, I'm
I
going
just
for a
kept extending, like very
slightly?
and a little more, just one more year. I think in the beginning when I traveled, I really just traveled alone, and I went to some areas in Burma that kind of had just opened up, and there were still gray zones where you were kind of allowed to travel through.
Yeah, Burma
but
was only
not-
recently opened up to
that
foreigners,
was
right?
the first year when
okay.
I went.
Okay,
And
interesting.
then it closed again, and
Right,
now
right,
it's
right.
open again. So at some point, I told my dad some stories, and he was like, and Germans are kind of like, you do your thing, I do my thing, we don't interfere much.
Yeah.
But my dad was like, I don't think you understand what kind of situations you put yourself into. And then I was just like, yeah, but you never really do, right? And then I was just kind of brushing it away. And my mom took it very personal. She thought I, on purpose, chose a country that's really far away from her. And I was like, no, this is coincidental. It just happened. This is not your fault.
But now, do they visit often? Have they been to India?
Yeah, they come every year.
Because I've seen a lot of stories where you are going to Germany.
Yeah.
And,
so I go every year and they come every year.
For the harvest season? Is that what you
I haven't gone for harvest season in a while. I usually go more in spring, summer. Harvest is a little later.
Okay.
Something else that you don't get everywhere.
Yeah, true. And when you were making your recipes, for example, when you were trying to shortlist, let's say, your menu for the bakery, were you actively trying to cater towards the Indian palate per se? Or were you making things very authentically as you would make it, as one would make it in Germany, let's say?
There were some things that were very traditional from maybe my mom's recipe or how German bakeries would make them. And then when I started, it was a lot of modern French. So you do these mini mousse cakes and eclairs and the small tarts. I think that's very modern.
Do you feel that's because of the increase in demand? Like more people started tasting your products, you'd want to make a more accessible or recognizable product, right?
Yeah, and also I really liked that at the time.
Okay.
I think now I'm getting a bit bored with modern French because it's everywhere and everybody's glazing and butter spraying and cocoa butter spraying, and it's getting a bit overdone, I think. But at that time, I really liked it. So it was a lot more from, okay, what do I like eating? What do I enjoy? And what can be a mix of things that other people and I also like.
And now you're like full on the
yeah, full on
the grid.
The electricity department recently came and I'm like, you consume too much. It's like a factory. It's a whole factory area. I'm like, yeah, but we need it.
And how has that been, dealing with like Indian systems and licensing?
Hard.
And because I'm pretty sure from German, like the German culture, it's very different, right? How you open a business and how it's sustained. That must have been a complete different learning curve to sort of understand that.
Any takeaways or anything that you only learned through experience?
Or which was a culture shock.
Yeah.
Like you weren't expecting this to be a part.
Directness you can't do. Like we had a police jeep in the lockdown saying, "Oh, you have to shut shop," and I was like, "Oh no, I have the."
Permission or grant?
No, there was a declaration from the government, what can be open, and I showed it to him, and he was so offended. He like fined me and closed the shop immediately. I was like, oh, in Germany that would be, no, I've read the law and I can show you. And for him, that was like a huge deal that I came and he was like, I'm the law. And I was like, oh my God. And then I had to go with my lawyer at the time, and you can't just go and apologize and ask. You have to have this whole chat. And then the lawyer was doing this whole game of, I know this person. I know this person. How are you next year? Are you still going to, it's this whole game. And I think Germans are terrible with subtleties. We can't read into signs. And I feel like in India, people are really good at it. Like even in terms of caste, sometimes they can figure out where somebody is from, what position they have with all these subtle things. And I have no clue. I don't know how this works in Germany. You have to tell directly what it is. There's no in between.
Yeah, to say it
There's
as
a lot
it is,
of in between the lines in India, right? In terms of Germans are very blunt. That way, they say what they mean.
Yeah, and you're very specific, and you have to follow specific things. And if it follows, there's a trust in the rules and in the government. So you also follow it, and you know that if you follow it and you're wrongly accused, that will be considered as a case for you. Whereas here, it's more about, I feel, networking, knowing the right people, knowing how it works, having a good relationship with the corporator, and being in touch, and the laws don't matter that much. Like our neighbors are very difficult to deal with, and they are the trustees of a big temple. So they have a lot of pull, so it doesn't matter if our compound is officially commercial and everybody signed and it's fine, because they have a lot of pull. So that whole game you have to be patient with, I think. And the other thing is that people let out their emotions a lot. So if somebody, a neighbor or somebody from the corporation is angry, they really
show it.
And that to me sometimes is, I think Germans can be a bit like Japanese sometimes. That's like you don't know what to do with it, and it really hits you, and you would never expect it. So I think you have to learn, as an outsider, I need to learn how to kind of anticipate certain emotions or give certain signals that, hey, you don't need to be raging. I'm with you. I'm on your side, Yeah.
So if Tasha and I were to go to Germany, and if we were to set up shop over there or something, what would be a cultural shock for us?
It's just completely defined. So first, if you want to open something, you can't, because you are not a master. So when you are an apprentice, once you finish your apprenticeship, then you can be a master. So you have to work under a master for 5 years for anything, whether it's electrician or carpenter or a tile layer or pastry chef, baker. It's guild systems that are very, very old. So they're very, very structured and specific. So I couldn't even open a bakery in Germany. So once you are a master, then it's just very regulated, but it's very paperwork heavy, because you need to have your costing really figured out, because each staff member is costing you almost double of the salary for social security and insurance and retirement fund.
All the PF
and all that.
Yeah.
What we call PF in
Provident
India.
That is a very complicated calculation, and insurance is huge. So you really need to know, man, if something falls on your foot and you didn't wear a steel cap shoe because I didn't give you a steel cap shoe, I'm fucked. It's not as bad as the US, but it's pretty bad.
Right.
On the other hand, if anything happens, insurances are there to cover you, but I think the running costs are just really high.
But it's way more organized, you're saying, right?
Very organized, very structured, but like, for example, this is not possible for a commercial space because you don't have a duct.
Okay.
So you need to have a specific duct. Otherwise, they'll immediately...
So all compliances and all these things are very strict, right?
Deep fryers, what is the temperature of your space around the deep fryer? But on the other hand, which I find amazing because the machines are so good, you can buy a used 20-year-old oven or kneading machine and it runs fine, and you can get it for like almost nothing.
Yeah.
So some things are also really great, and all your electrical things are defined so they work.
True.
Because they are made for commercial spaces. So I feel like once it's set and running, it's much smoother. You don't have so many issues with power cards.
And the anxiety that somebody's just going to come and shut down shop for some random reason, right? That's
Exactly.
another anxiety that Indian restaurateurs or entrepreneurs have to live with. That even if you're doing everything right, there could be some random thing that might just pop up and now you can't.
In the old place, we had a neighbor who, his wife allowed us to keep to let our rainwater come into their garden and water their garden, basically.
Okay.
And he saw it and he just flipped. He almost hit me with his umbrella. You know, he was completely gone. And you just have to deal with these people. Like, it's crazy.
Even as Indians, you get taken aback by their reaction sometimes. So somebody like who, as you're saying that, you know, Germans are quite blunt and calm people. Indians are very reactive to the things, and especially the things that they are passionate about or
act on emotions also. I feel very emotional, yeah.
It comes out quick. I think Germans have grudges for longer, but...
And since you're self-taught, which this thing do you find more difficult? The bakery part or the pastry part? Because the bakery, right? Because dealing with the dough has its own... I was reading about how you were talking that it's very intuitive. You need to have a relation with the dough, which is so true. Like, the same dough will turn out completely different in Bombay because of the humidity and in Delhi because of the heat. So have you figured that out, or are you still sort of...
No, it's an ongoing process, but I think you're much better with reacting fast. But flour also is not so consistent, and it has a huge effect on your bread. Yeah, like in Germany, your mill will give you what is the ash content, what is the mineral content. They give you all your stats, so before the batch comes, you can already kind of plan how do I react to it. In pastry, I think if you follow clear instructions and you have a steady hand and you work clear, your product is going to come out really nice because it's more chemical. What chemical reaction?
It's scientific, right? It's all measured and exact. Yeah, it's a science, more of a science. That's true, because even when I was doing bakery and pastry in Oberoi, I like breads way more. You could also, as I think somebody who's dealing with food, there's a lot more interaction in it, right? You
it never gets boring.
Also, you understand, even if you screw up, you learn something new about the fact that, okay, what happens if you overproof something or
and you
underproof
can't
something.
fix it. Like, I think in pastry, you can often still
fix it. Bread, if it's done, also the whole process.
And it's a 2-day process. Like with pastry, okay, you make a tea cake. That's like a 1-hour thing, or a jam. That's a half an hour thing. The assembly in the end, that is multiple different elements. But with bread and croissants and even donuts, like we have long fermentations. It's a really long process, and you make big batches. And if that
doesn't
fails,
work out, the payout.
It's a pain, and it really hurts. Like when you start out, it hurts a lot. And it happens so often when you begin.
Especially with things like sourdough, there's like 14-hour fermentation. You've put in so much effort and time.
And I used to hand knead everything.
Hand knead everything?
Yeah, even brioche.
But that also makes... So you went all hardcore.
That deserves an achievement. Wow.
See, that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, of how much hard work goes behind a brand before it pops up on the scene, right? Now everybody must be like, oh, it must be nice to run a cafe. But how did you get there? Is
I think the challenges, the different challenges that you face over the course of your journey is also something that maybe I personally love to hear.
Today, I think it's more redefining what I am, because what we spoke about before, I'm not the brand only anymore. So what is my goal long term, and what is the brand's goal, and are they aligned or partly separate? And then there's also a lot of people management. So a lot of my thinking energy goes into how do I deal with this issue, or two people have a fight, or there's a shift in team leading. And usually when you have a new team leader, a lot of people, it's like a vacuum power vacuum. So then people are testing out limits again. So you need to watch very closely what happens in all your sub teams.
Right.
Or somebody is, now somebody might die in someone's family and then they need to go home for a month and then you have to reshift. So there's just a lot of people management that I'm trying to.
But are you a
deal
natural
with.
at that? Or do you, because when you're running it yourself, it's a lot more pressure, but you don't have to really think about anything else apart from just executing the idea you have in your head.
Yeah.
But when you have a whole team, the concentration goes from the product to a lot of it goes into HR and all the other facts that come in. So does that come in naturally to you? Or like I'm bad with training. I don't know how to
work myself.
exactly
I'm not a good.
Put forward the
Unless
idea
I
that
do workshop, because then I'm doing it for them. But if I work, I just want to
work alone. Yeah. So that I'm sort of figuring out that when you are building a team, how do you learn to delegate and also divide your time away from the product? Because if you're so closely involved initially, it takes a while to detach from the fact that, okay, I need to worry about bigger things now, the product and the brand is set, right?
Yeah. I don't think it comes very natural to me, but I have a very strong curiosity about people and relationships and dynamics. So I find it very interesting, but it costs me a lot of energy. And I had this moment, I think a few weeks ago, I was just crying and I was like, everybody just thinks I'm always calm and I'm always responsible. And can I just be irresponsible once? Because you're this person, you have to stay focused. And that takes so much energy and thinking process because you can't be reactive and you have to stay on top of things and you have to observe people and work with them. And I think for me, I know that I'm not a micromanager, so that helps in detaching. I trust people very easily and be like, hey, I know that I would probably do it a little different, but I think you can do it. And we have to check in every now and then and work on it together. And I work well with people who like this dynamic, who do not need to be micromanaged. So finding those people that you work well with can take time, I think.
True.
But I feel like right now the team is just really nice and everybody is very passionate and understands or works well with me and this dynamic. And I think everybody is very different. And you need to have enough self-awareness to know how you work and who you work well with to build a team. I don't think there's one right way. You just need to be self-aware enough to be like, or I don't know, for you, maybe it's like, I'm really pissed off and I just want to work alone. And maybe just say that or communicate that to people. And then everybody's like, oh, cool, I know, because now it's been announced and
yeah, the communication part becomes really important.
So a team of 50 now. Could you just give me a breakup in terms of the departments and the number of things, just to get an idea?
I think 6 sub-teams. We have front of house, pastry, savory, inventory, HR, and housekeeping. So we have a 3-step hierarchy. So there's no GM right now. That's me. Then there's 6 team leaders, and each team is between 3 and 10 people big, or 3 and 12. So that comes up to 50 right now. And I feel like right now the structure is really nice. A lot of people are not necessarily trained, but the systems are fairly good, and everybody knows if the machine breaks, I call housekeeping. This one guy the team leader from housekeeping, he's good with electrical things. He knows how to fix things. He knows all our suppliers and technicians. Then it's his thing. If you have a problem with an ingredient, you go to inventory. If you have an HR problem, it's me and HR together because I'm still very involved with that. If there's something with production and feedback from a customer, then front of house needs to talk to the kitchen. And then we do team leader meetings where they can sometimes I think it could be more structured, but I feel like sometimes it's also really important for team leaders to have this chat where they can vent a bit and be like, man, that was so annoying. Last week that really pissed me off. And the others are like, yeah, I know. That's really shit.
We're here with you.
And that you don't become silos, because now we have 6 teams and they could become really, really separate and don't know each other at all. And that's very dangerous, I think. So ideally, I want to start this program when we are big enough that one person can do a day in pastry or one day
cross trainings and
like,
cross
or just
exposure.
experience, right? Like, what are their pains? What are their strengths? What are their requirements? Because sometimes you don't know, and then the server can run into the savory kitchen and be like, what the fuck? Like, this is not there. Why are you taking so long? Without any empathy for they've been slammed and their burner is gone or whatever, right?
I think that's why it's a practice. Like when I joined Oberoi's, before I could join the kitchen, they made us work a month and a half in F&B with the same idea that they are sister departments. And once you know how they function, you understand where they're coming from. If food is getting delayed. Because from a kitchen perspective, if it's taking 5 more minutes, we don't understand why it is an issue for them. But when somebody's really sitting and looking at you that where my food is, it's a very different conversation. So unless and until you've done front of the house, you don't understand the urgency or the issue. So I think
how you're also in front of house, you're this in-between person without possibility to change it. Your only thing is communication.
Communication, true.
And that is so hard, right?
Like, you don't have the product in your hand. Somebody else has to take out that product and you can only communicate. That's why there's so much... like most of the fights are between service and kitchen, right? Because
and inventory also. There's a lot of...
I think inventory gets slammed by everyone in case they can't
they're like,
get...
man, I asked you yesterday, why is it still not here? And they're like, you asked me 20 other things also, and I'm trying to get it.
True.
So while building this team, did you have any bad hiring experience?
I don't regret any of them. Very cheesy. They all teach you.
Very
They do though.
Yeah.
And one situation I feel like I really did not estimate the danger of certain characters. And that and I knew that this person had to go, but I didn't react early enough, and it led to 2 guys having a physical fight, but one was a group of guys with the other person, and they were all team members. And I felt like that was a very, very dangerous place to be, and I wasn't there. It was, of course, the first day that I went to Germany, that happened, and then it's like, fuck, now I have to deal with this, and it was the situation where I really felt like, hey, I should have cut this off much earlier, because I knew somewhere in my head, like, this is a really bad dynamic and there's a lot of tension and I need to break it. But I didn't know how to immediately react to it. And I think when you go through these bad experiences, you can spot it faster next time. And you really have to
act on it.
Yeah, you have to act on it, and you have to protect what you have.
Yeah.
Like when I started out, because I'm quite agreeable, I am always like, but they have strengths. I just need to bring out the strengths in these people. And then at some point we're like, no, some people you just can't work with, and it's nothing personal, and you just have to take them out and react to it very fast. And that took me a while, I think. But now I'm quicker at spotting it.
So now, like after having these experiences and learning from it, what is your ideal candidate? Like if somebody is applying to SAPA.
That depends for what.
Suppose it's kitchen and or to work in the kitchen. What is your ideal candidate? What points or qualities do you look out for while hiring? And also, do you still, a lot of times there is a difference. A lot of people prefer hiring raw talent because it's easier to mold them the way you want to do things.
Yeah.
And usually when you hire a culinary graduate, they come with a whole ideology of their own, right? So these 2 questions: what's your ideal candidate, and which one do you prefer, raw talent or culinary graduates?
I mean, I feel like the best experiences we've had with locals who are not trained.
Not trained.
They might have worked in hospitality, but they are not trained. I feel like they have also a lot of respect towards you as an employer because you would have taught them a lot of things, and they feel very empowered by it. You know, we have people who've been the delivery guy for DTDC, asked for a job, and now he's a captain in front of house and he's doing so well, you know? So those things are amazing. I really like working with women who also have families. I feel like that somehow aligns really well with me, and they know that if they have something with their child going on, they can get an extra off. Or if they need a loan at the beginning of the school term, when they need to pay school fee, they can always take a loan. So I feel like there's that trust. But I think attitude is the biggest, right? Like whether you're trained or not, you want to be I think a team member that kind of really supports production. You can identify and prioritize what is needed. Like maybe your R&D for something you wanted to try is not as important as getting out all these things on time and checking if the fridge is organized. So if you have a natural inkling for thinking for everybody else and being like, hey, I saw that we still had this fruit in the freezer. Should we use that up? Having those ideas really helps. And then just wanting to learn and not having too much self-esteem attitude, I guess. And I think that's this general complaint, right, with younger people.
Right. So I think one interesting thing about SAPA is that you don't really do deliveries, right? Never considered. Why is that?
I think there's this fundamental thing which is very ingrained in Germans that you go to your local bakery and buy something. Like you can't deliver.
The experience has to be standard, right?
Yeah, and bread can't be shipped. It's this really strong thing that it should not be shipped. It's very unsustainable. It's not a good addition to the product. You should buy it when it comes out of the oven.
But if I'm not wrong, you guys tried deliveries for the first time at the end of last year, December last year.
The bread, Stollen was...
So Stollen we have always delivered. So that's this one thing, because it travels so well and it has to rest and it's not very delicate. From the beginning, 4 years ago, that is something that we've always shipped. And that was always also the messaging. Like,
throughout the year.
I can't ship you anything, but now I'm making this only in December. This is
it's
your
a Christmas
chance.
traditional bread, right, Stollen?
So now, please order this because this is the only thing I can ship.
And a lot of people ordered as well. I remember seeing just stories of Pune, Bombay, Delhi, and it traveled. And I was wondering, how does that work out? Like, does it travel well and does not need like a lot of refrigeration or anything?
It doesn't need. So it gets better with time, and the shelf life is like multiple months because after baking, you dip it in butter. Liquid butter, you completely submerge it and then roll it in icing sugar, and that's fat and sugar, and that's an anaerobic layer.
So it forms like a coating on top.
So nothing goes in or out. There's no bacteria, and then we vacuum pack it on top of that. So nothing really happens to it.
I mean, for your domestic parcel deliveries, didn't you also have to like send it outside of India as well?
So we did New York, Singapore, New Zealand, France.
Okay, that I didn't know.
And how did you do an
delivery.
international delivery? This is through the same
It's the same DTDC. It's very expensive, but as long as somebody is like, hey, I'll cover the cost, I'll do it. So one of our longest customers from Mysore, her daughter is studying in Germany. So she made this Christmas care package and she asked like, hey, what do you want? And she's like, send me SAPA Stollen. And she's in Germany, she can get Stollen.
That's crazy, yeah.
Other question which I've been thinking of asking, what is your actual opinion on the German bakeries in India, which you find in like...
The old school one.
Old school ones, or if you're going towards a more, destination that is heavier on the European population on tourism. So be it Orwell, be it if you go up in the hills or in Goa, you see a lot of these German bakeries. But how true to the actual German bakery?
Zero.
Zero, right?
Yeah,
it's just
zero. So apparently, I think there's one in Varanasi that was actually a German guy, but even because some of them, they were founded so long back when the ingredient range was really, really different. So I think it was super hard. So even he has changed a lot of things. But I think the story is that some English guy came to Nepal and trained these guys and said, this is a German bakery. And these guys then took it everywhere. And they were in all the touristy places. So I think it's the specific niche of bakeries that are available in touristy spots.
And I think it was also this thing of what we were discussing, if a formula works, then you just like copy paste it everywhere, right? So I think a lot of Germans were traveling and Israelis were traveling back then. So that's why there are a lot of falafel shops in such areas and one German bakery and then a lot of Israeli
But some of the falafel shops are really
good.
Some.
Because I think the Israelis stayed longer, right? They did the training
And they're also
part
very specific.
very
Like they will not take it if it's not great. Like they are very clear.
clear. True.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I always wondered. That are these German bakeries actually?
No.
Is there anything German about it? Because the product isn't. It's just croissant, breads, crepes.
And it's always run, I think, by North Indians.
A normal,
usually, or
a localite, and it's never laminated. None of the things are like the croissant is a bread.
No, it's never laminated.
It looks like a croissant, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just basically after reading the article, thinking that it was such a fresh take on expansion. Usually the concept that if it works, let's replicate it as fast and long. So it was really refreshing to see that you don't have the same ideology. And the second part that you mentioned that really hit home was the fact that it's difficult to recreate the hospitality everywhere, right? Which is what a lot of brands, I think, don't either think about or worry about, the fact that if this worked for us, will the same thing happen in other cities while we're not present, or do we get the same staffing? So, like, if not expanding into another SAPA, you were saying that you would want to venture out into other things, right? So what are those other things that you have in mind, even as a vague idea of what other things that you might venture out into apart from SAPA as a brand?
I mean, I feel like I don't want to talk too much about things that are like too far away, because I feel like you can jinx things sometimes.
Definitely.
But one thing that I really was thinking about for a while, because I like interior design a lot, was a bed and breakfast.
Okay.
That's really well curated and that speaks for the heritage that Mysore has. I don't think there's very, very well curated experiences that way in Mysore right now. And that other places have done so well, like Jaipur has done it really well, even Pondicherry. And they really represent some aspect of the heritage and the culture and incorporate that into the experience. And I find that really interesting. But also, if you name any Western concept in Mysore, it's not really there, or not fully done with a focus on one thing. So even if you think of Italian or a nice cocktail bar, none of that is there. And I don't really know what comes up as opportunity yet, but I think there's a lot of room to do many things.
And what's the bar scene in Mysore?
Terrible.
There are no proper cocktail bars.
No, so I mean, you have bars, but usually there's this one bar that I sometimes go to, and you have to order your tonic separate, your ice separate, your gin separate, and then order a cucumber salad, because they won't put like anything in your glass. So you have to like assemble the drink yourself. That's what.
So you were almost the bartender with the bar.
Almost, yeah.
So being trained as a bartender might help in that.
A little bit.
So before even the scaling journey, even before someone thinks of scaling, right? Even aside from SAPA, if someone wants to build a brand, right? Specifically a bakery or a pastry shop, say, what are the general rules that they need to keep in mind in terms of the costing?
I think like we don't do it as traditional. I think usually you say about 25 to 35% ingredient cost, up to 8% rent, up to 20-25% staff cost. I think that's, and then you have your 5% tax and your other
miscellaneous.
Yeah, miscellaneous upkeep, electricity, and all of that. So I'm trying to use that as a guide, but in pastry, it's really hard to stay in that ingredient cost, because butter, you can't really negotiate down. There's a specific price for it. Our flours are specific flours, so we need to spend on that. I like the texture and flavor of adding nut flours into pastry, whether it's a sablé or a sponge. So that brings up your cost a lot, because nuts are super expensive here. Good chocolate is expensive. They just announced that the cocoa harvest was terrible and prices might double next year.
Wow.
So, and there's nothing you can do about it. And our ingredient cost right now is 45%, which is really high.
That's very high.
But I think we have that luxury because our rent cost is much less than in the bigger cities. So I can offset it a little bit.
Okay. And according to the cost, how do you try to decide a price point, right? So this would be someone, for example, who's looking for advice to when they want to build a brand, for example, right? So if there was a certain general price point to be around according to the cost, is there a certain point
Yeah,
that you'd
because you
advise
can't
to keep
really
on?
price them as the Metropolitans are, but you're using the same ingredients, you're putting in the same effort.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the cost versus the selling point ratio? Or is that something that you, with time, sort of understand
Yeah,
after
you
hitting
get better at it. I think it's always good to start a little lower and over time maybe increase it a bit. Anyway, you have to increase it with inflation every year because inflation is quite high.
Yeah.
So you need to rework your prices all the time. But when I started, it was really random. Like I didn't use like a costing software or something.
Yeah.
And I was just like, roughly that sounds fine. And then later on, when we did the formulas, I realized like, man, some products, like if it has pistachio, shoots up. Raspberry is more expensive than all the other fruits.
Right.
That shoots up. So then you can also balance it with other products. Like usually a custard is much cheaper than a ganache. So now you can't price your ganache donut 3 times more than your custard donut. So you bring them to a meridian in the middle where both of them balance each other out. I think that works quite well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And like, does it or has it made a difference? Because I think the tourists have a different spending capacity than the localites would, right? So then you also have to figure out what price point fits both of them, right? How much you can get out of the tourists while keeping the locals also happy.
So I feel like for us right now, we are somewhere placed in the middle, but I also feel like it's fair to charge a little more because our crockery is handmade from India and our washroom is very nice. And we really try for that whole experience. That cost also kind of needs to be considered when you price something. And you know, you don't have, you have a nice plate and you have nice cutlery and you have a nice sugar. We use a lot of organic sugars. So all of that needs to be incorporated in the price and you have to talk about it to make people see where you're coming from. But there is a lot of Mysoreans who think that we are terribly overpriced. And then there's a lot of Bangaloreans who come and they're like, oh man, you're so cheap, you know? So I guess we're somewhere in the middle. But I also feel like there's a certain ethos, of course, that comes with scale in Germany. But if you say maybe a pretzel or a bread, it can't be that high in a country like India. Like, you can maybe go, even in Germany, like an organic bread would maximum cost 6 to 8 euros usually. So that would be like 400, 500 rupees. And I think beyond that, it's a bit intense to charge more than that for a staple or even a bun or a pretzel. It can't be more than 200 rupees, I feel. Like then it just becomes this absolute luxury thing. And it might be justified, you know, if you put crazy other ingredients inside
like
and you have
putting
this
truffles
process.
and and all of that.
But then it becomes an actual treat. And for me, a bakery is still something that you kind of try to go regular and it's not only a treat.
Right.
But I also am very, very happy when I see people and they're like, I can't afford it all the time, but I really like to come sometimes with my girlfriend and treat myself.
So they save up and then they come.
Yeah,
that's
like
their...
that is so nice to see.
So before you introduce something to the menu, for example, is it normal to presume that it would have been in one of the drops and then you would have tested out the audience's feedback, for example?
Yeah, so usually we do trials and do internal tastings with kitchen, front of house, savory. We give it to everybody. Everybody can chip in their feedback. And then we give it to customers that are regular. And we kind of be like, hey, we just want to try this. We have some extra from a trial. And then we put it on the specials menu, and then we put it on the regular menu if it does well.
This is the best way of doing R&D, right?
Yeah.
In terms of you get instant feedback, and you also understand what can. But these are week-long menus. It's not like just specials on the weekend.
No.
So what if a menu isn't really working, right? Sometimes, as you said, it's hit and trial. A lot of times things work and things. So do you still continue it for the week? Or,
yeah. Like there are some things that generally don't sell well, but we know that some people really like it. Like the matcha and raspberry tart, for example. It's not as popular, But we know that some people really like it. So we already know that, hey, when we have matcha and raspberry tart on the menu, reduce the tart numbers, increase the other numbers. But we still want to have it on the menu.
So do you promote it, which also goes into our next segment of, social media and how to use it to actually sell food. But do you promote it then? Like all these limited items or the ones that you know aren't going to sell out, do you push it out as limited portions, or we only have limited quality of this?
Not so much.
Or it's organic marketing again?
Yeah, I think our social media is also a bit random sometimes. Like whatever I think looks interesting, then we talk about that. Or
Are you handling the social media for SAPA?
yeah, I still handle it, but I have somebody who helps me with planning content or guiding on shooting. But a lot of the text is still me, reposting is me. Some of the shooting is still me, so I'm still very involved.
And how important a part has social media played in creating that community and getting that reach for SAPA?
I think a lot. And also during the lockdown, everybody was online, right? So that really pushed our reach. And then because I think the population in Mysore is slightly less on social media, we had a lot of Mysore customers who would come and say, my niece from Bombay told me to come, so somebody in Bombay sees the post and then tells their relatives in Mysore, you should go and check this out.
And that's a new thing, right? Usually for a brand, it was difficult to get publicity in their own city. But now this trend of people from other cities figuring out shops even before the localites do through Instagram is happening. I went to Vijayawada recently, and there was a coffee shop called Veranda, which was like way better than any general coffee shop in the metro. Vijayawada in Andhra Pradesh. We had gone for a biryani R&D tour where we were trying to figure out. And I was quite surprised by the sort of product that you were getting there in these places that you wouldn't expect.
Right.
And then I checked their social media, and their social media was on point. So I think a lot of people were also getting to know, and a lot of them were localites sitting there, but a major population was just tourists that would have gone through the effort of figuring out where this is and then visiting there. So I think social media has at least opened those doors, right, for a lot of brands.
Yeah.
I think today it's a necessity. Even inside, outside this industry, I think a social media page is a must when building a brand, when trying to, increase your brand awareness in general, right?
But is it, like, do you think, and this is to both of you, is it important to be on social media? Because there are places like Rameshwaram and all, which are working on somebody else's social media, right? They don't really have to post much.
There's also legacy places.
No? Yeah.
Rameshwaram is a pretty new brand, I would say, 2019.
Oh, okay.
2-3 years old, but...
No, but there are these exceptions where social media didn't really play a role at all.
Sometimes the restaurant or the cafe is doing a good job, and the other time they're just really active on social media through other people's posts. Like people who are coming to SAPA, they'll put it up, and that'll reach other people, right? Rather than SAPA's own page doing it. So I think that also has changed, where organic marketing through word of mouth has started happening on social media.
It's a random thought, but I was just thinking a lot of cafes, maybe this is more of a Bangalore problem, but a lot of cafes, be it even like Third Wave, for example, a lot of people would come in and buy one coffee and pretty much sit there for the whole day, right? So that's something that I've heard some of these brands are trying to figure out solutions for, or a minimum order spend or something like that, right? So is this a challenge that you guys have faced as well? And have you tried to maybe minimize that kind of occasion happening?
We don't have that much. I mean, because it's
Mysore specifically.
So when it's busy, it's people from outside, and they usually want to order everything.
Right.
And because there's this feeling of I can't come back so soon and I want to try all of this, and somebody told me about this product, but this also looks really nice. They usually order a lot.
Yep.
And sometimes you have people that really spend a lot of time at a table, but we never intervene because I think even if it's very busy, it feels very pushy to say, hey, you have to clear the table. Because in some restaurants, there's a clear rule that your slot is from this to this, and then we have a second dinner slot. But we are not a restaurant as such. So I think then you can't bring in this system of, okay, now you have to go because your slot is over. Because we are a cafe, there's walk-ins, it's a bistro, there's movement from all directions. So you can't be so specific. And then it feels very unfair to somebody if you do that, right?
But how many covers is SAPA right now? The larger
60.
60. So that also helps, right? If you're a smaller cafe and people are retaining their tables, then it
True.
becomes difficult to keep it going.
I feel like some would say that 60 covers and a 50-member team is like it's an overstaff. Like some people would say that.
Yeah.
Do you feel so?
But we
at
have a
all?
lot of takeaways. So I think that plays into it. And it's a very large property. So housekeeping is also a lot,
Right,
like
right.
gardening and sweeping. And then we have somebody who just cooks for everybody. And we don't have more than 8-hour shifts. So that also plays into it.
Okay.
So, and how much of this thing is like well thought of when you're building your own team and kitchen? Kitchens are notorious for being like at times either overworked or toxic in terms of the working environment. So was that a conscious decision from the start that if you do build a kitchen and a team, it's going to be more around the team rather than, you know, getting as much as you can?
Yeah. And
out of
that's
the
also
team?
why we open late, because like for me, it's like, would I want to do that? No, I don't want to wake up at 2 a.m. and bake. So I can't ask anybody to come at 2 a.m. unless somebody is really okay with this and maybe it's a need of the hour. But I would rather say you have a later afternoon to late evening shift. And yeah, not being overworked. I think it makes people really unfocused if they
True.
work non-stop and you're not happy and you're not content. So how can you make a good product if you're not content?
True. If you're overworked, you sort of stop or give less fucks about the product then, because you're like, okay, I need to just get over with the day.
And
rather than-
service also, right?
True.
Like if you're drained after 10 hours, how can you do good service? I think that's really hard.
But is that something that you also struggle, because a lot of chefs and entrepreneurs, and especially in hospitality, there's a major difficulty in maintaining the work-life balance, right? Work is 80% of your day and then you get 20. So these 8-hour shifts, do you apply it for yourself as well? Or is it more for the staff?
I think when you run something, you have to be very flexible. But now it reached a point where I can say, hey, on a Tuesday, I'm just driving to Bangalore and come here, which is great. But also, I might have to wake up earlier than I would and come here. And then I have some work calls late in the evening. So it's more spread out.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's harder to really take off and not think about work and not be available. But I think it's gotten a lot better with our team structure now after 4 years than before.
And now that you're in Bangalore, who runs the show then, if you're not in
All
the
the
city?
team leaders together.
Okay, so
there's no one person. It's each team leader together. And obviously there's some people who take a little bit more responsibility than others and naturally do so. And I think that's also verbally and contractually appreciated. So they know that it's seen that, hey, you're stepping up a little more, but I'm not giving you more power per se to decide over others. You still need to work on an equal plane with everybody and figure out how to solve problems. And each team leader also, when they take off, they know who to assign to in their team. And they have briefings before they take off to be like, okay, guys, I'm going for a week. This is what's going to happen. This is the person that's going to call the shot. And it's all defined. So there's
proper handovers.
Yeah,
and
there's
pro-
no ambiguity as such, which is important, I think.
No, which is, and it causes less issues and fights, right? When
Yeah.
you've had usually the guy goes for a leave and then you realize that, okay, this is left.
Yeah.
That's how commercial kitchens usually do it.
So how we usually like to conclude an episode is by a rapid fire segment. So we ask you a few questions, put you on the spot, and see. So my first question was, I think it's about 8 years you said that you've been here. Do you have a favorite Indian dish / Indian pastry?
Indian pastry is kaju katli. Favorite Indian dish, I think, is dosa, for sure.
Yes. But why kaju katli? Like,
I don't
it's
know.
so many.
It reminds
desserts.
me of the Lübecker marzipan, I think,
Okay.
from Germany. So I think there's that. And it's not too sweet. It's very nutty.
Where do you think SAPA could be in another city, anywhere in the world, not just India?
I think
Where do you
like a
see?
small Italian city. That
Small
would be
Italian.
nice.
Interesting.
And would it be the same sort of vibe that you have?
A
or is
vibe
it-
maybe, but products.
I think products would have to be
different.
very different,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
True. And apart from Germany, what's your favorite place to travel to apart from India and Germany? Then?
Not that I've seen everything, but I would really, something that I really want to do is like horse riding in Mongolia or Uzbekistan. There's these really lovely long horse riding treks, but that I haven't done yet.
It's really nice. And yeah, if you could go back to day one of SAPA, knowing everything that you do today, what changes or how would you have done things differently?
Be more direct in communicating with the team and figure out your accounting from the beginning. Don't start later on. That's a huge mess. I would have liked to avoid that.
What German dish or ingredient or like a product do you think is not popular in India but should be? Or would be, considering that it would match with the Indian palate?
Pastry?
Anything. It can be like
I
something
think,
which is very German that Indians don't know about, but you think it should be popular in India.
well, there are a few things that are very meat-based with really, really nice demi-glace sauce. And we have a lot of different varieties of potato dumplings that I love.
Okay.
And I think the flavor could work because the demi-glace is so intense. Otherwise, it can be a little bit bland. I think, for Indian palates.
Dina, as an entrepreneur and a foreigner in a tier 2 city as well in Mysore, did you feel any pushback when it came to changing the dynamics of Mysore a little bit, especially among the locals?
I think mostly it's been like really welcoming. And I keep thinking that I think it's very, very open-minded and welcoming for a foreigner to come in and be so, received so well, and people love the product and they want to have a relationship with you and they want you to be there. And so many people are like, man, we're so happy that people talk about Mysore and SAPA and they want to come to Mysore and you've really put us on the map. And I was like, oh man, that's a really big honor,
That's very nice.
Some people, I think, find it, they are not particularly happy with the pricing and they kind of attach that to a foreigner identity because I think they kind of assume that it's only expensive because I'm not from here, whereas the reason for the price being different from a very local Iyengar bakery is not that. It's just that it's a very different
The cost itself.
Product and the cost, like you mentioned.
So it's just a different product. And I recently had a conversation with someone about this also because I guess there's a lot of pride in regionality, and I think I try to communicate that, hey, I love the diversity and I'm not trying to take away from it. I'm not saying that our way of baking is better to an Iyengar bakery style of baking. And it's good that all of it is available.
I think we're pretty much done. I can go on about other things. I was going to ask that, have you started dabbling in savory food now that there's a whole savory and hot kitchen menu? Like, do you try those dishes as well apart from bakery and pastry?
Yeah, for sure. I'm involved in all the R&D for front of house drinks, for savory. I give a lot of suggestions, and usually when we trial something, I'll be the one who says, oh no, that's too much pepper, and everybody else in the kitchen will be like, no, that's good. So I adjust my expectations a little bit, but we kind of develop a lot Okay.
So the recipes are not necessarily always yours?
No, it's a collaboration from everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Dina, I know you don't like answering this question. I've asked you how you see the future of SAPA and everything, but I wanted to ask you where you see yourself in, say, 5 years from now.
Oh.
Maybe 5 is a little too much? 3?
And Mysore, I think, for sure. Working on SAPA, maybe working on another concept, but really trying to work on SAPA as an institution that's known for good quality products, training interns really well, and giving people something to take when they leave SAPA, and having that not expectation, but being known for a certain standard that represents our values and that people really understand what we are trying to communicate. I think that would be a great place to keep working on.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great vision to have as well. Put a standard as well to the product as well.
True.
So, Dina, something exciting to look forward as well. I believe you're doing a pop-up here at the conservatory. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Like a sneak peek into what you're thinking and what you're planning.
Yeah, so it's a 2-day brunch that is a set menu of 7 courses. And the idea is German summer and what I have as food relations to a German summer. But then I kind of play around with the elements of it. So asparagus is a very big season for us for like a month or 6 weeks. Everybody goes on asparagus. So how can we make a slightly new twist on an asparagus dish, or berries and cream, or rhubarb? We have a lot of fruits. We have a lot of specific drinks that we have in summer. One thing would be like, we would go to a lake or to a public open pool and go for a swim, and we always take gummy bears. You know, that's like a really big thing, German gummy bears. So I'll make our own version of a pâte de fruits, which is kind of a jelly, to give for people to take home. But the red string is this, suddenly it's warm again, the days are long, you can cycle everywhere, you go have a drink, you can sit on the side of the road until 10 p.m. and the sun is out and have nice long chats with everybody. And there's a lot of joy and just enjoying or being cheerful about the season and making full use of it.
And a community feel?
Yeah, like you go out a lot more, you socialize way more. There's a lot of music festivals, and then usually you have these food stalls at the music festivals where you have like Flammkuchen, which is a tarte flambée. It's an Alsatian French-German dish, and that's very common when you have festivals outside. So you just get your tarte flambée and then enjoy music with your friends. So how do we get those dishes and make like a really nice small tasting menu that's very summer specific?
Okay.
And that sounds really fun.
Yeah. When exactly is it planned for?
April 6th and 7th.
6th and 7th.
7th. Done. So you heard it on season. Book your tickets fast. I am definitely. Also, I'm going to come to SAPA as soon as possible.
Please
I've
do.
been planning it for
you
ages.
haven't come yet.
But I think I'm going to make that travel this time.
Yeah, if you do, please go.
Pre-order
time as well.
Done.
Yeah.
But anyway, Shwez, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Dina.
Thank you so
It was
much.
amazing having the conversation. And